So we're reviewing the Favorite Cobalt CBL902M lure rod. It's a terrific entry level rod. I've managed to have a few bass on it already. It's performed really well. More of that coming up in a moment. Is of course a honest review. I'm not paid by anyone to do these reviews. I'll just give my honest opinion. But it certainly was a time for a new lure rod. I was using this old Abu Garcia, the Veritas. I don't look after my rods very well, as you can see. But this is a 7-foot rod, and I've sort of hammered it really. Should have done a proper job with the hot melt glue on the rod tip as well. You see where it's been battered by lures, and I've even retrofit an old stuck that in the end. So I reckon I deserved a new rod, and that's what today's video is going to be about. One of the first things I notice is how cheap the rod bag is looking. Doesn't really matter. I don't tend to use the rod bag much anyway on my rods, which is possibly why they're in such bad condition. Doesn't help. But this is an entry level rod, so really the rod bag doesn't come into it at this price range, I don't think. You can see where the trim's got that cobalt blue as well. Just adds a nice little touch to the rod. A little bit. So although it's a carbon rod, it's got a very sort of matte finish to it. And then first things first, noticing those very small eyes as well. This is a 2-piece rod. It's 9 foot, and I think 9 foot's a good size, particularly for the bassing when you've got to move those fish around a little bit. The butt handle is very strong, tough. There's no real give in that. It's not a softer one. I really like the handle. And then that is capped off by, you see the blue bits of trim there. There's no give in that either. It's got like a weave effect on the butt section as well, and that looks like cork. Obviously it's not cork anymore, don't use that these days. And that sort of, there's no give in that cork looking material. It's like a composite, like fake cork thing, and everything where it changes the material, so where the cork here goes into the rubberized handle, there's no give, there's no gap, and it's not loose at all. And the reel seat, we'll have another look at that reel seat in a moment, but the reel seat's made of a fantastically strong sort of plastic, and again all the trim nice and neat. So far so good for this rod. And then, as you'd expect, even at this price point, it's considered a entry level lure rod, but still it's going to cost you maybe 80 quid. But you still find the whipping, it's tipped in that sort of blue, and obviously finished to a very high standard. That's pretty tough, that. And if I just zoom in on there, you can see that's the retainer for the lure. I don't tend to use those. I've even considered clipping them off some lure rods I've had, because they get tangled up, particularly with braid. But that's pretty sturdy. It's always something you can utilise. Now the rod rings. So single legs on these, unlike the old lure rod. It makes them a lot lighter. And look at that quality. That's not bad at all, is it? Nice big eye, set for the fixed spool, obviously, being a lure rod. And then following that down, you've got basically just got one eye on the butt section of the rod, 2 equal sections here. And then obviously they're going to get progressively smaller, but these, although those first 2 eyes, pretty good. The braid's going to fly through that. A little bit of flex in there as you want, but they do get, as you go down, they do get on the tip section very small. And you can have a look later on in the video when we start landing some fish. Struggled a little bit with the leader, so I'm going braid to fluorocarbon, and when that leader knot, no matter whether I do an FG or like a blood knot to blood knot, does sort of clip on that, particularly obviously the first tip section. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Yeah, the reel seat itself, brilliant. Really tough. I've had the reel on and off that a couple of times. Really easy to use in wet conditions. Had a day fishing in the rain. That tightened up nicely. That's fine. There's no give at the end of the session. Performed really well in the rain in terms of the grip. Absolutely love that handle. I'll always seek out a handle like this from now on. Something that's not too soft. So you're in sort of contact with the rod. For me, my left hand's on that. You could cast all day, and the actual weight of the rod as well is really helpful. We're quite spoilt for choice in the UK for lure rods at that entry level price. Check out the Sakura range. There's Salt Sniper 902H, again another good 9-foot rod, and also lots of the Savage gear, particularly the Salt CCS 92. That's the 15 to 42 gram rod, or even the Finesse, the softer version of that. So here we've got the Pachenko, which would be one of the heavier lures that I'd use on this rod, and even that's going to be about 25 grams. So this is the OSP, these Do Live Stick. These are the 6-inch soft lures that I use with a weedless hook, but I don't weight them. And I've put this on here because these are the lightest sort of lure that I'd want to use on the lure rod. They're fantastic lures. We've done a review of them in the past. But this would be sort of like your lower limit of casting, almost into LRF sort of weights. Not much more than 10 grams here. And there is here that little carbon weave effect on the rod as well, on the blank. I think that's more of a cosmetic thing, to be honest. And you can see up and down the rod it's tipped with this blue colour, cobalt, or cobalt blue. Just a nice little touch really for a lure rod. Makes it stand out. Won't help you catch any more fish. But it's got such power in the rod. And as for matching the reel and the line and the leader with the rod, little bit of personal choice here, but I really do prefer the 2500 size reels. So I'm often asked about the reel as well with these rods, and I definitely recommend a 2500 size Shimano reel. There's so many reels on the market. I've only tried a handful, and I don't claim to be a real expert, but I've never had a problem with these Sedonas. I've used the X-Age as well, and again these are sort of just above an entry level fixed spool reel really, so particularly suited to light spinning, and this is such a tough, robust little reel. I know there's a lot of other manufacturers and other reels you can use, but I certainly recommend a 2500 Shimano. And as you can see, when you put it on the reel seat, that just locks in perfectly. There's no play at all with that reel seat and a 2500. If you want to make it easy on yourself, get yourself a Sedona. I thoroughly recommend it. They very rarely come up second hand, these reels as well, but I'll leave a link if you can get one of those as well. That would match this rod perfectly. As with all of these videos, if you've got other better suggestions or you disagree, you've got a bit more experience, then please let everybody know, because I want this to be sort of learning for all of us. We can all make improvements with the tackle we buy and the fishing we do. And here at the Saltwater Angler, I want to make it more of an open forum. Although I really do recommend this rod and reel. There's more of a matte finish to the blank as well. And for those of you that haven't done much lure fishing, generally I'll use braid and a fluorocarbon leader, and then I set the leader depending on the water conditions and water clarity. The leader needs to be about at least 4 foot. Sometimes I do 6, 7, 8 foot, particularly in clearer conditions. So my only little bugbear with this rod is the size of the rod rings. Now this only becomes an issue when you're using a leader. I've got a fluorocarbon leader here of 16 pounds, and I've used an FG knot to tie that together. Sometimes you use like a double blood knot, and it just clips on that tip eye. Obviously lots of repetitive casting, that's not great for the knot and the strength of the setup. I've been asked what leader I use. I'm using this Cigar at the moment. This is the Ace Hard. It's really tough fluorocarbon leader. It's Japanese. Sucker for anything Japanese, really. This is £19. I don't go much heavier than that, but the bigger fish in autumn, you're going to need something a bit thicker. Okay, so eventually a little bit of fishing footage for you. The last few videos we have shown me catching a fish. What we're looking at here is playing the fish in sort of average conditions. But you can see how 9 foot gives me the choice there to manoeuvre this little schoolie around the boulders. Keep fighting to the end, these bass, don't they? But it's really tough. It's such a tough rod for something that can cast those small lures. And although I've been in favour of 7 foot lure rods, this 9 foot's given a lot of options. You can see the rocks and boulders there just off. It means I can move a fish around it when I catch it and negotiate it round sort of deeper troughs as well. Plus, added to that, I've been fishing all day sometimes, and there's no you don't get tired with a rod of this weight. Thanks very much for watching. We'll get back to more of the vlog style as we're coming into autumn, and I'll still be chasing those big bass somewhere. If you've got anything to say or any recommendations for a similar price point, both the reel and the rod, I'd love to know, and it'd be great for everyone to have a good list of what we all recommend. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll try and get a video out next Friday.